I was worried there was a glitch for a second. I got an email that you joined, but you weren't showing up in the participant list.
Okay, so I am going to be recording all of the advisory committee meetings. So if anyone would ever like to refer back, or if the minutes just aren't as detailed as you'd like them to be, just know that those recordings will be available to you all. Also, I'm going to be kind of looking between my laptop and my monitor, which is over here. So please don't think that I'm not paying attention or ignoring you. I have notes on one screen and the slideshow on the other. So I'm dual monitoring today. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on our inaugural Advisory Committee meeting. I'm thrilled to have you all here with us. It's been a long road to get here, so thank you all for being here today. I wanted to share this evening's agenda with you before we get started. Just to run through really quickly, our CEO and General Manager, Josh Baker, is on the line today and is going to be offering a welcome and remarks. Then I will proceed with the roll call. We'll go around and do introductions. I will go over the DAC guidelines. We'll talk about some new business. Then we'll have a presentation from our Director of Planning and Marketing, Martin Barna, who's on the call with us today as well. And then we'll have time for any questions, comments, or discussions that you might have about the new Dash network. And then I will let you guys go for the evening. So let's get right into it with the welcome from Josh Baker.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thanks for the intro, Whitney. Someone mentioned, I don't remember who mentioned when they were jumping on, the interesting world of Zoom that we've been living in. And I will just say that I'm really happy to see you all here. I am very frustrated that we have not been able to get to a point where we can meet you in person. That was really something that we were hopeful to do in setting this up, which is a lot of the reason that it has taken so long to get to this point. But I really appreciate you carving out the time and being willing to get on yet another Zoom, which I can only imagine how many you have been on lately. And to get past that Zoom fatigue and listen to us and to engage and to be a part of this exciting opportunity. So I'll try to keep my remarks brief, although those who work with me and who've known me for years have always said that I don't do a good job of that. And I tend to ramble on and talk for a while. So I'll just give you that warning to begin with. You will not have to tolerate me doing that at every single one of your meetings. So if you make it through this one, you'll be in good shape. I do hope to join as often as my schedule permits to listen in and to be a part of the conversation. It's not always possible, but to the extent it is, I will definitely do it. So my name is Josh Baker. I am the general manager here at Dash. I see some familiar faces on here, and I'm really happy to see new faces as well as familiar ones. I've been here with the organization now for 4 years, and it has been a wild, wild ride. The day that I got here, I asked the question, and it was an interesting answer, but I asked the question whether we had an advisory committee or advisory committees. As you can tell, the answer was no. So it's certainly been a dream of mine to have that happen. ever since getting here. So I'm glad that we're getting it going. A little background of mine. I am a lifer, a transit lifer, if you want to call it that. I got into the industry driving a bus, and I actually still hold my license, and I am fully licensed to drive any bus in the Dash fleet. If I ever chose to do so, although I avoid that because it seems to scare the heck out of the people out there on the road and and the drivers, and I don't want to take them off guard. And frankly, if I tried to go somewhere on a route, I probably wouldn't know where I was going, and I would probably make the wrong turn, which I've been guilty of doing before. From there, I spent a number of years after I graduated from college working with demand responsive human service transportation. So I was involved in medical transportation and transportation for individuals with special needs, individuals who qualified for additional services outside of even paratransit service. So there's of course fixed route bus service, there's paratransit service, and then there is very specialized medical transportation services. So I've sort of had some experience in the full gambit of those. Spent a number of years working with a human services organization who was providing a whole breadth of types of services ranging from mental health services, to substance abuse services, early in-home intervention services. So I got a real exposure to that population and that work that was going on in the community I was in. I always was involved in transit, even in those days, and eventually it came to a point where I was working in the locality. I was down in southwestern Virginia. I don't know if there are any Virginia Tech Hokies here, but Martin is a UVA graduate, and I never pass up an opportunity to give him grief for that. So if you're a UVA grad as well, I have great respect. We're friends, but I'm still going to give you grief. Anyway, I was at Virginia Tech. I worked with a locality down there that was not far from Virginia Tech, the city of Radford, Virginia, which is where Radford University is, a small but growing college in the New River Valley. At the time, there was no public transportation service in the city of Radford or around the university. So in 2009 or so, I started the conversation with the city and the local leadership to say, hey, you need transit. I'd like to help you with that. Are you interested? And fortunately, they said yes. So I worked with them. And we eventually launched a brand new public transit service for the city of Radford, Radford University in 2011. From there, I worked a number of years before going to Lynchburg, Virginia, where I was the general manager of the Greater Lynchburg Transit Company, which in many ways is very, very similar to Dash, both in structure, in relationship with the city, and a number of other elements that the system has going on. Worked with them for a relatively short period of time before coming here. But during the time I did have the opportunity to work with them through two major capital projects, building a brand new transfer station, which was somewhere around $17 million project, and then the construction of a $32 million operations and maintenance facility, which I never got to work in. I lost a lot of years off my life working on those projects, but fortunately I had the opportunity to come to Alexandria, and it was one I couldn't pass up. So here I am. So that's my background, that's my story. I just wanted to tell you that so you could get a little bit of an understanding of sort of where I come from. And I'm going to stick around. I'm hopeful that in the introductions, we'll hear a little bit from each of you of kind of your backgrounds and how you've become involved in transit. But transit is my life, and it's been my career, and I love it, and I love the work we do. With that said, even the best of us we don't know everything. And one of the worst things that we can fall into as transit professionals is thinking as a transit professional and not thinking as a rider, not thinking as a community member, not thinking as someone who maybe is a prospective rider who hasn't been on board. So one of the important things there in helping to make sure that we hear those voices are you. To have a group of people who are here, hopefully because you love transit, but also because you use it, maybe you depend on it, and to be a part of our organization in a very special way. And that is to really help us to have a perspective, not only the perspective of a current rider, but of a prospective rider, of a community member, and whatnot. So my hope is that as time goes on and as you become more familiar with this group, and you're the first ones, this is the first ever, so it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have recommendations of how we can do this better, and I hope you'll share those with us, how we can make it more effective, how we can make the time spent with you more effective. I really hope that you will take the opportunity to tell us that, and to really work with Whitney. Whitney is a fantastic person to lead this initiative. She's really got a passion about communication and making sure that our community is connected and engaged with what we're doing as a system. So I think there's going to be a lot of great opportunity here. Couple of side notes just for you, and I'm sure Whitney will go over these. Hopefully you've seen the guidelines that we set up. Those are initial guidelines that will hopefully help to make an effective and efficient group of you coming together. If you haven't seen those, please let Whitney know. We'll make sure we get you a copy. But effectively, the way we envision this working is you are very much a partner to us as the workforce of DASH. This is not a board level committee, and there's intention there. And the intention is that you can be in the weeds with us a little bit. You can get a better understanding of the inner workings of DASH. We hope to always have a presentation that will help you get a little sense of what's going on with our organization. To also be not only a voice as a rider or as a prospective rider or as a community member, but to be a voice of DASH. So I want you to think about that in the perspective of my hope is that there is a day where you can be there at an event, at something that's going on with DASH, wearing a DASH shirt and speaking as a rider who's connected and a community member who's connected with our organization in the way that you are, which I think really says a lot about when that happens, right? When you're in those situations, it changes the dialogue. It provides an opportunity for someone to speak with someone who is not only an advocate, but a voice for them. Who is also an advocate and a voice for DASH and can help to bring those perspectives together in a different way. So I encourage you to get involved in any way you possibly can and have time to. I recognize you have a lot going on in your lives, and it may be that you can only make it to these meetings when we have them scheduled. That's fine. But I really do hope in between, when you have an opportunity, that you let us know how you'd like to be more engaged, and Whitney will certainly, of course, work to help provide those opportunities for you. Whitney's going to ask you to think about who might want to chair this group and be a vice chair. We're not going to ask you to decide on that today, but if that's something that you might be interested in, I encourage you to do that. I want whoever the chair is and the vice chair to know that you are welcome to reach out to me anytime. Again, Whitney is your liaison, and I can tell you that anything she hears, she's going to make sure makes its way to the appropriate people within the organization and to me. Hopefully those are good things and bad things. We certainly don't want to set up an environment where you have to sit through hearing a lot of complaining. That's not a particularly productive work. We understand things don't always go right. We understand things can always improve, So we certainly want to hear that, but we also hope that you'll be able to talk to us about what you found to be working particularly well, so we do more of it. So, of course, the Whitney's going to go over the details and all of that, but I just wanted you to think about that. And then, the last thing that I wanted to say is we may present to you a lot of information and content, such as the new Dash network that Martin's going to talk about. There may be things going on the board level that you all might have an interest in hearing more about. But our goal is to make sure we bring something to you at each meeting. So there's a short presentation so you can learn a little bit about what's going on. And those people may come back and they may be a familiar face where you can have a more interactive dialogue about it. But we're not always going to be right in understanding what we should be talking about. So I would ask that you think about things that you think would be helpful for us to discuss, and to let Whitney know what those are in between the meetings, so that we can make sure we get the right people here. Again, as I mentioned, I'll try to tune in when I can. I can't guarantee I'll be at every meeting, and it's not really my intent to either, largely because I don't want to be, and that's why I don't want to be involved in these meetings on a regular basis, because I feel like it creates a more natural dialogue for you all to really have a partnership together and a bond as a group, working with my team to help make sure you have a voice and are hearing what you'd like to hear about, advocating for what you feel is important to advocate for, and also being a partner of Dash and being out there with us, representing us and advocating for us within the community and within our ridership. So I always feel like when I become involved, it does change the dynamic a little bit. So I tend to stay a little arm's length, but please don't interpret that as me not wanting to be here, hear what you're saying or to be a part of what you're working on. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. With that said, I've talked enough. I didn't make any promises that I'd be short, but I will say that I'm going to be quick here. Also there is something going on right now, which you may have caught wind about, that we may touch on a little bit today, but I'm going to say it's really a moving target, and that is the perspective of Dash being fare free. As you may know, we were fare free during the pandemic. Well, the pandemic's still going on, but we were fare free until we were able to equip our buses to be safer for collecting fares. There now seems to be efforts on the side of the city to get us the funding to move us to fare free, which has its pros and cons, but ultimately, if that's something that the city can identify the funding with us to do, I think it's great. But I will put the little asterisk on that there is a lot that has to be sorted out with that. And the prospects of it today, as opposed to longer term, are a tough lift and have a lot of different moving parts. So again, we don't know an awful lot about that right now. We just know what's been asked. We know what's potentially going to come out in the budget work sessions, but honestly, the board of directors hasn't even talked about this. So they're going to be, the next board meeting is going to be the 14th of April, which they're all open. By the way, we want to have these meetings open. So hopefully over time, we'll have people who aren't on the group, on this committee, tune in to not only hear what you all are talking about, but maybe to provide you all some comments and feedback. So hopefully that will happen. So we'll see where that goes. Again, I just wanted to kind of put out there that we are aware that that's happening. And there's just a lot of different moving parts to that have yet to be flushed out. In fact, I've been on multiple calls on that today, so more to come. So with that said, I will step aside, let you all talk. I'll try to stay on here. I may turn off my screen if I got to jump on another call, because I am expecting one to come in here anytime. But I look forward to hearing from you all. I look forward to seeing what this group does, and I really truly thank you for committing your time to us and volunteering to be a part of this exciting adventure. So I'll turn it back over to you, Whitney. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, before we head into our introductions, I do want to do a quick roll call. This will help me, and hopefully it will help you all to get to know each other a little better as we move through these meetings. So, and I also want to confirm how you would prefer to be addressed as well. So I'm just going to go down the list here. If you would please unmute yourself and just give me a quick present to let me know that you're here, that would be perfect. So let's start with James Durham.
Present.
Thank you. And you prefer to go by Jim?
I go by Jim, yes.
Jim, okay. To make sure. Thank you. Also, please, if I'm mispronouncing your name, please let me know because that's important. I want to make sure that we're getting that right. Katie Finn. Christopher Fuller.
Present.
Thank you very much. And do you go by Chris?
Yeah, I go by Chris. Thank you.
Okay. Kellyanne Gallagher.
Present.
Perfect. Bonnie O'Day.
I'm here and I prefer just Bonnie.
That's Bonnie. Murat Omeh.
Present, and Murat is perfect.
Thank you. Sandy Sainer.
Correct, I'm here. Correct being you said my name right.
Awesome. All right. Ross Simons.
Present.
And Eric Van Horn.
Present.
And I said everyone's name correctly? Awesome. We're on a roll. It's a good sign, guys. All right. So now that we have done the roll call, I'm going to go down in the same order and just ask that you all each give just a brief introduction of yourselves, a little bit of background, what brought you to the DASH Advisory Committee, and maybe just an interesting fact about yourself. So Jim, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Whitney. Well, first of all, I retired from full-time employment in 2012, and I've been volunteering since, and a lot of that volunteer work has been associated with transportation, including serving on the West End Transitway. So I've been, it's kind of a hobby, a transit interest and advocate since about 2012. I do ride, I ride Dash bus. Currently, I've actually returned to the paid workforce during the pandemic. After volunteering for the health department, I've been hired, and on the weekends I do case investigations and contact tracing for people who have been afflicted with COVID. In terms of other interesting facts, I work a lot with the Alexandria City Public Schools. Normally pre-COVID, I worked a little bit with the staff during COVID, and I hope through that relationship and this relationship, we can introduce more Alexandria's children to transit as a way of transportation. I think it's going to be an more important part of their lives than perhaps it's been in a lot of my peers' lives as we go forward, especially in an urban area like this. That's all I have.
Thanks, Jim. Chris, you're next.
All right. Evening, everybody. My name's Chris Fuller. I actually live in Arlington, but I'm a teacher in Alexandria City, working with special education students, 12th grade and up. So a lot of our work, we're actually going out to job sites, but before COVID, but going out to job sites, taking public transportation. And this was a large portion of the education piece. So I really wanted to make sure that I could be a part of this group, making sure that the needs of my students were being taken into account whenever it comes to, I know a big part of it was revamping the Dash Tracker app last year. So just making sure that the transportation that we're building in our community is accessible to my students.
Thank you, Chris. Kellyanne.
Well, hello, everyone. Kellyanne Gallagher. I have been involved in public transportation for about 20 years. Spent a good part of that time at the American Public Transportation Association, 2.5 years, the New York MTA in a senior leadership role, and now I am running the Commuter Rail Coalition. So playing around at the edges of transportation for a long time, but I've been looking for an opportunity to get involved on a local level and to give back and to both get some added perspective that will help me do my job better as well. I've been a resident of the city since 2012, I think it is, and I can't imagine a better place to live. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you, Kellyanne. Bonnie.
Thank you. I am Bonnie O'Day, and I am legally blind, which means that I have some vision, but definitely not enough to drive. You don't want me on the roads. So I use the Dash bus, and I also use sometimes paratransit service. I worked for a transit agency in the 1970s, probably before some of you were born. And then I had kind of a career change. I went off and got a PhD, and I was a researcher for a research firm here in DC, and I retired in 2015. I've lived in Alexandria since about 2000, and I've lived in 3 different places, so I've learned to navigate 3 different bus lines or bus systems, I guess. But an interesting fact about me is that I worked with a couple of people, including Jim, who's too modest to mention it, on a little project called Tuesday Night Tandem. And we match a visually impaired person with a captain. The captain sits on the front of the tandem, and the visually impaired person sits on the back and pedals and helps with balance. And so because of that, I've gotten involved in advocating for bike lanes as well as accessible pedestrian crossings and sidewalks as well.
Thank you, Bonnie. Murat.
Okay, let me see this from my phone. I hope you guys can see me and hear me. Okay. So as you mentioned, name is Murat Omay. I work for the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Transit Administration, specifically in the research office under the Mobility Innovation Group. So the majority of my time is spent on development of programs for the future of public transportation, and or as we call it, mobility, which also starts including other mobility services that are not provided by the public sector agencies such as transit agencies. So I'm talking about Ubers and Lyfts and what have you. So a lot of the time that we spend goes into integrating those services into public transportation. So I do have graduate degrees in transportation planning from Seattle, University of Washington, and transportation engineering from a university in Scotland. And I did attempt my PhD, but the work requirements didn't allow me to do that. So I am one of those ABDs in public transportation policy. So one of the reasons why I wanted to be involved is because of my professional involvement in different programs at the FTA research office. One of them is, for short, it's ATRI. It stands for Accessible Transportation Technologies Research Initiative, which is the goals are to use technology, leverage technology, including robotics and navigation systems and AI and machine learning and things in that nature to integrate people with limitations, older adults or other vulnerable communities such as small children into the public transportation system, not the paratransit, but public transportation system. And one of the other programs that I was involved was Mobility Services for All Americans, which involves primarily rural transportation, human service transportation, HST, and other non-emergency medical transportation services and paratransit services to kind of work in an integrated manner using one dispatch instead of these defragmented dispatches and resources and all that. So, that was one of the programs. And currently I do deal with mobility payment integration and performance metrics development. So that is another thing that I would think that it would be beneficial for this group to learn a little bit about how we measure the performance of such improvements, right? There's traditional methods of measuring the performance, but we developed these innovative ways of measuring it from the user perspective rather than the system perspective. So in other words, just because you provide a bus stop somewhere that is, accessible and in walking distance to someone doesn't necessarily mean that's what they want. So we kind of start to look at it from the user perspective and see if there are any adjustments that needs to be made in that field. So those are basically my background. I'm sorry I took a little bit longer than the others, but I hope that I can contribute and I can learn from this group as we go along.
Thank you, Murat. Sandy. Oh, Sandy, you're muted. Oh, Sandy's still muted. Hang on, guys.
Oh.
There you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thanking you all for whoever picked me to be on this committee or board or whatever. By the other introductions, there seems to be a lot of talent. I'm sort of maybe the only outsider. I never worked in transportation, but I've used a lot of transportation over the years. For almost 4 decades, I spent a lot of time out of the country and foreign countries, particularly Europe and Asia, using public transportation. And we often think that Europeans are very hipped on public transportation, but I would take a bus to a pharmaceutical or aluminum plant or whatever the industry I was doing risk assessments to, and often people were sort of shocked that I was the first American that ever showed up there on a bus. But you come to find out that it depends on who you're talking to. But I've always tried to force myself in certain situations where I would take public transportation for a variety of reasons, mainly to understand the culture. So moving from Houston, Texas here in '99 and getting rid of 3 vehicles and sort of introduction to Alexandria's public transportation system was a sort of trial by fire. I can remember the first time I needed an air filter and taking a bicycle out Duke Street to someplace to try to get a part. But as a writer, I've seen a lot of changes for the good. Some that you make second, guesses as to why routes are set up the way they are, but I look forward to being on this. I have said that I did risk assessments, and so I have sort of a mind that says, here's what's going right when everything is working right, but here's what happens when the lights go out, or what happens when we have a pandemic, or what happens when you have problems with roads and not allowing the buses to come on time, and situations like that. Strictly from a consumer standpoint, I realize many of you folks have a lot of background on what can happen and what is planned, but it's once it happens, what is the B plan? So that's what I hope that I can contribute to this cadre of talent. And I'm quiet, I'm not muted.
Thanks, Sandy. Okay, Ross.
Thank you. Like Sandy, I come to this group from the perspective of a writer and a consumer. I've been a Alexandria resident for almost 50 years. And I can remember the little old rickety red buses that used to run between Washington, D.C. and Alexandria before there was 395 and before there was Metro. So I have been on these buses, both good and bad, all these years. And like Sandy, I've spent a lot of time overseas. And I've gotten the opportunity to ride on buses all over the world. So I have that perspective as well. From my point of view, I am excited about the opportunity to help Dash because I believe it's an excellent system. Even excellent systems could use some improvement. My background is I've been a leader in not-for-profit organizations for many years, and then about 15 years ago, established my own consulting firm working mostly with not-for-profit organizations. I live in central Alexandria, and I guess as one will see, I've known Dash for many years. I have a little Dash bus that actually sits on my desk and has for a decade. My fun fact, probably for those of you who are transportation nerds, is that my daughter was one of the founders of Motivate, who ran city bikes and the Capital Bike Share here in the Washington, D.C. area. And just after January, was appointed by the Biden administration as the Director of Public Affairs for the U.S. Department of Transportation. And we have agreed that there is no conflict of interest. We've cleared this with everybody. And so I'm very excited to participate in this transportation initiative with Dash, and proud of the fact that I raised a transit conscious family. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. And Eric, last but not least.
Hi everyone, I'm Eric Van Horn. I was born and have been raised in Alexandria, so I've been here my entire life other than college. My background is I've worked in marketing ever since I graduated from college, and have been on the agency side for most of my career. Over the last year, I actually switched over to the client side and work in healthcare now. There, though, I right away got to partner with their kind of parking and transportation group, and that's been very interesting experience. Understanding their needs and how it integrates into the entire system. I too am definitely of the consumer mold. I've been a rider for years and years, and I agree, it's been very interesting seeing the entire landscape shift. I I've always lived on the west end of Alexandria. So, you know, the stop rate, the new, or it's not new anymore, but the Mark Center stop has always fascinated me with the giant bus depot there now. So, you know, I'm very excited to definitely learn from you all and, you know, participate in this. This is, as far as kind of a lengthier service for the city of Alexandria, this is definitely, you know, my first rodeo in that respect, but, you know, I'm definitely excited to be here.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you all for those introductions. I suppose I should do the same. So my name's Whitney Code. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Dash. I've been with Dash for 2 years now, just over 2 years. My anniversary was in March. And the first year I joined, we had the Metro Blue Line and Yellow Line shuttle service right after I started, pretty much. And then this year was the pandemic. So it's been a very action-packed 2 years here at Dash. Before I joined, I'm actually from South Carolina, and that's where I was living and working. Actually, for aviation, I worked for the airport in Greenville for 5 years before joining Dash. So I have some transportation experience, but this is my first entree into buses. So it's been an interesting experience, but I'm fascinated by it, and I learn something new pretty much every day. And the people here are awesome. And now I get to work with all of you as well. So I'm very excited about that. Okay, so without further ado, let's hop into the guidelines. So these are just kind of some bullet points that I've pulled from the guidelines. So this isn't everything. So I am going to send the guidelines to you all along with the meeting minutes. So you'll have that document available to you whenever you'd like. But I did want to point out a few items within the guidelines just to bring them to your attention. So the Dash Advisory Committee, which is lovingly also known as DAC, exists to provide a communication link between Dash, its customers, and the Alexandria community for the purposes of providing input to Dash leadership on a wide variety of service-related issues, improving customer outreach, and promoting an overall excellent customer experience for Dash riders. I think Josh alluded to this a little earlier, but DAC is an advisory body, so it does not set or establish Dash policy, alter service standards, influence contracts, modify service or routes, or affect personnel matters. However, there are actions that this committee can and we hope will take, and I'll get into that a little later. The primary roles for this committee include assisting staff with the execution of the organization's mission, programs, and services, to participate in discussions about service quality, service-related issues, and potential solutions with Dash staff. That one's very important. We want to hear your ideas and your input. Provide advisory input to Dash staff and leadership on key decisions. Identify customer needs and assess whether those needs are being met by current services or policies. Serve as Dash ambassadors in the community, and I'll talk about that a little more as well. Helping to communicate information about Dash to existing, new, and prospective riders. All right, you can see that. Assist Dash staff with planning, execution, and evaluation of public outreach programs and activities in support of Dash decision-making processes. Communicate with Dash staff as needed to help inform decision makers regarding, again, service quality, as well as capacity and reliability, and where needed, advocates for change to positively affect the experience of riders. All of those are very important pieces to being a part of this committee, so we hope to get your feedback. Now, membership. We provide a designated staff committee liaison, that's me. So I'll be your main point of contact with the DASH staff. However, any information that you want to provide to Josh or to anyone that presents, I'm happy to pass that along. And as Josh mentioned, his door is always open as well. So if you want to reach out to him, he is perfectly all right with that as well. The advisory committee does not receive any financial compensation for time or attendance. This is a completely voluntary committee, so thank you so much for your time. The committee is composed of not less than 9, but not more than 14 members, so we're right there in the middle right now with 11. Every 2 years, a new chairperson and vice chairperson will be elected by the committee members at the time. Such persons will serve in that role until the expiration of the current term. And there's more information about that in the actual guideline itself too. We'll talk, I think Josh mentioned this in his remarks as well, but we'll talk a little bit more about electing the chair and vice chair today as well. The terms. So the term is 2 calendar years from the anniversary date appointment to the committee. This is a little different because you know, you submitted your applications a year ago, but since we didn't actually begin the committee until now, your term starts now, as opposed to when you initially applied. So for example, if you're appointed July 15th, the term shall expire July 15th after 2 calendar years. Following the expiration of the term, you are welcome to reapply. However, you may not serve more than 3 consecutive terms for a combined total of 6 years. However, if you want to wait a year and then reapply, you're more than welcome to do so. An individual who served previously and term limited out must wait at least 1 calendar year. Jumped ahead of myself. Members of the committee must attend at least 50% of the regularly scheduled meetings. This committee is scheduled to meet once per quarter, so there will be 4 meetings per year. There is an opportunity to meet more than that if needed, but that is what's going to be set for this committee, so once per quarter. Notification of a pending absence should be given to me, please, prior to the meeting. And a member who misses more than 50% of the regularly scheduled meetings may be removed from the committee. Any member once removed due to unexcused absences will not be eligible for reappointment for a minimum of 2 years. So this slide actually speaks to what Josh mentioned earlier about your participation in events or outreach efforts that we have. Each committee member at least once a year should participate in a special event for the purpose of joining staff, solicit customer feedback about programs and services. And listed here, you can see that's including but not limited to a public meeting, an event at a community organization, condominium association, senior home, community center, bus stop information tables, again, participating in a community event or street fair, customer surveys, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a variety of outreach efforts that we have throughout the year, and I'll be sharing those with you to hopefully get your participation and help be an advocate for DASH. Committee members' input from special events will be reviewed and discussed by the committee, which would then provide any formal recommendations to staff for improvement or for recognition of excellent service. So again, in anything that you participate in or anything that we do, we're always looking for your feedback, and these types of events are no exception. So I mentioned the action that the committee can take. The committee will maintain the authority to take positions on key organizational decisions related to service and customer experience. So the committee is able to draft and endorse advisory letters on key issues that would then be provided to Josh and or senior management for consideration. In order to meet the quorum requirements for that action, at least half of the committee members must be in attendance. So for example, if the committee is comprised of 12 members, at least 6 must be present for the committee to take any action under consideration. The advisory letters may be drafted by the chairperson, vice chairperson, or a designated committee member, which we'll talk more about in just a few minutes. Myself or a member of my team can also help with the letter preparations if needed. So whether it's a letter that's adverse to what we're proposing or in favor of, I'm happy to help draft the letter if needed. Advisory letters to the leadership must be endorsed by the committee by a modified consensus. That means one member can vote against the action and the action would still pass. However, if 2 or more members vote against the action does not pass, and the letter wouldn't be able to be drafted as a consensus for the committee. That was a lot of information. I will again be providing these guidelines in writing to you all with the meeting minutes. However, I do want to pause just for a second before we hop into new business to see if anyone has any questions about the guidelines that I just went over. And again, that is not the exhaustive list of everything that's included in the guidelines. There is more, so I do encourage you all to read those when you receive them in case you have any questions.
Have you sent those out already?
So they're available on the DAC webpage, which is dashbus.com/DAC, but I will be including them individually or in the meeting minutes in the email. So you'll have an actual PDF version as well for your record.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we'll hop into new business. As we discussed, there is a chairperson and vice chairperson that will need to be selected for this committee. I don't want to put that on you all right now, seeing as how you just met. I know you want some time to learn a little bit more about each other and learn a little bit more about who it is that you may want to elect as the chairperson and vice chairperson. So what we'll do is anyone who's interested in either of these positions, if you would please submit a short statement to me that I will then share with the group. And then at our next committee meeting, we'll review the statements and then we'll allow anyone interested in the positions to share their thoughts with the group. And then you all will vote on who you'd like to be chair and vice chair. Does that sound all right to everyone? All right, perfect. Now, in the meantime, I do suggest that you elect an interim chairperson because our next committee meeting is not going to be scheduled until July. And so in the event that there is any action that you all would like to take between now and July, we'll need an interim chairperson to do that. So is there anyone interested in kind of taking up the mantle of interim chairperson until a chairperson and vice chairperson can be voted in?
I'm happy to do it if no one else will do it.
Okay, and I'm a little rusty on my Robert's Rules of Order. So I believe that is there Josh, help me out here. Do we need a second?
So if they're not being officially elected, it's just serving as interim, it can just be a consensus if everyone's okay with it.
Okay.
They can just thumbs up it, whatnot. But yeah, since you're just bridging a gap,
Yes.
that's fine. But once it kind of comes into play, then you would someone would offer that, right, as an motion, just like you did, and then people would sort of second it, and then people could say, I'm in favor, I'm not in favor, and that would be how that would move. But
Yes. Okay, I wasn't sure if we needed that for interim, so it sounds like we do not. So maybe just a thumbs up from everyone who is in agreement that Ross will be the interim chairperson until we can vote in. All right, I see lots of thumbs up.
And Ross, thank you for stepping up, Ross.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Ross. Okay. Next order of new business, the regular DAC meeting. So I mentioned that this committee will meet once per quarter. And so I think for simplification, it would be great if we just went ahead and selected the months and dates that we'll work with, and then go from there. And that way we won't have to, there won't be any guessing. Everyone will be familiar with what, let's say, Wednesday of each quarter will meet. So, so for the remainder of this calendar year, we have July and October. So I am suggesting the first Tuesday of each of those months, and then to be continued for January and April of next year.
May I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Do the dashboard meets monthly, and I'm wondering if we should schedule our meetings to meet before their appropriate monthly meeting in case there's some action that we want to bring to the board, or do we just bring it to staff? I'm just wondering if, we would ever go before the board, and if so, should we make sure that our meetings correspond with theirs in some way?
Yes, so the board meets monthly, I believe it's the second Wednesday of each month. And that's actually why I was proposing, excuse me, the first Tuesday, because that would give you all time to get the information that you need and draft a letter if needed to go to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and if I might add to that, Bonnie, thank you. That's a good question, because then we assemble the packet that goes to the board typically the week prior to the board meeting. And it goes out on the Friday before the board meeting. So I would expect a communication from you all. I might include in that packet, right, the written packet. And there's also, depending on what the subject is, might ask the chairperson to join during my manager's report of the board meeting, which is where I have the leeway to bring in whomever, right, to speak on the matter. I might invite the chairperson to come and speak regarding that position. So it is a good thing to be at that date in advance of the meeting, especially also in advance of the time that the packet is put together. So thank you for bringing that up.
So may I just ask the people that are on this call right now, the committee members, that happens to be the 4th of July week. And I know we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but people may choose to travel that week. Is everyone available on the 7th of July to their knowledge at the present moment?
As far as I know, I am. I'm available.
Yeah.
Who makes plans in a pandemic?
Well, this is Jim. I probably have 2 or 3 competing commitments on almost any Tuesday night, and I just wondered if there were other nights that worked as well for everybody on the committee. And so,
Yeah, Tuesday was just a suggestion. If Monday works better for the group or if Wednesday works better. Again, as Josh mentioned, the packet typically goes out the Friday before. So I want to make sure to give you all enough time. So maybe Monday, the
Well,
first Monday.
Monday, July 5th is actually Independence Day observed. So that's a holiday.
Sorry, yeah, outside of July, of course.
yeah, and Monday does have the disadvantage a lot of times it's a holiday, but with the exception of the holidays.
Well, what do people think about Wednesdays? It's in the middle of the week. Is that an issue for anyone?
I would strongly prefer a night other than Tuesday, if that's possible.
I could do Wednesday. I would want to shoot to be off by maybe like 7 o'clock or so. But other than that, I can make that work for Wednesday.
Okay, should we then establish at least for the next two meetings, July 7th, Wednesday, July 7th. And then the first Wednesday in October is the 6th of October.
Sounds good to me.
I'm
That's
for
great.
it.
Okay,
Concur.
Whitney, you fine with that?
Fine with me. Sounds good.
Okay,
Sounds
Good.
like we have our next two meetings.
let it be.
So let it be. All right. Well, this is going faster than I thought it would. All right, committee. Okay, so that takes care of the new business for now, which means we are ready to hop into the presentation for this evening that's going to be presented by our Director of Planning and Marketing, Martin Barna. But Martin, before you dive into your presentation, would you also do a brief introduction for the committee so they can get to know a little bit more about you?
You read my mind. I didn't want to miss out on the fun. My name is Martin Barn. I'm Director of Planning and Marketing for Dash. I've been with Dash for a little over 4 years, and Josh gives me a hard time about the UVA Virginia Tech, but I could give him a hard time because I've been with Dash exactly 1 week longer than he has. So it goes back and forth like that. But I guess just for me personally, I grew up in the area. I grew up in Fairfax, and have always had a strong affinity for cities and transportation, specifically public transportation. So that's what I studied throughout school. I've worked with several transit agencies, including Fairfax Connector and a couple out in California. I lived in the Bay Area for a couple of years, so I worked for a few transit agencies out there. My focus is generally in service planning, but any sort of fleet planning, long range planning, all things planning, I guess you could say is my background. So looking forward to participating in this group on probably a pretty regular basis, just because of the nature of my position. So I'll probably be a frequent face, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think one of the biggest fears of a planner like myself is to become an armchair planner. So I really enjoy these opportunities. But like Josh, I also have my CDL, so I'm able to drive the bus and have from time to time. But I enjoy riding the bus as well, and I do so as much as I can. I live in Falls Church, and I have 2 young boys that I often take on the bus as well. So trying to inspire that next generation. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a bit of an intro for me, and I'm looking forward to kind of having a two-way a situation here where we can kind of both have ideas and questions going back and forth between one another, and hopefully not just me presenting, just rambling on. So I'll probably have about a 10-minute presentation tonight, but at the end of it, I'd be happy to take any questions or feedback that you guys have. Really looking forward to that. Okay.
So Martin, I'll control the slides for you. So just let me know when you're ready to go to the next slide.
That works for me. Thanks. So I guess maybe before I jump right in to my slides, I just want to acknowledge this is kind of a really great time. It's an exciting time and an important time for Dash and for this group to be involved with Dash. We've got a lot of major projects going on. Through the last couple of years. Whitney mentioned the platform improvement project we had 2 years ago. Obviously, we've had COVID the past year or so, which is less exciting, but has been a big deal, obviously. And then obviously we've got some new electric buses. We're becoming kind of one of the local leaders in electrification of our bus fleet. And then a number of other things. But perhaps one of the biggest that I want to highlight is the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan and the new Dash network. So hopefully some of you guys have been following along. We've been going through our current our annual service planning process and budget process, which we call the TDP, the Transit Development Plan. And that is kind of where we lay out our roadmap for the next year for FY22 in this case. So we've been doing a lot of outreach over the last couple of weeks, and we've been doing a lot of virtual meetings. I think a few of you have been able to attend some of those. So hopefully this is new to some of you, but for those that have heard it before, I'll try and keep it relatively brief and leave time for plenty of questions. But anyway, the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan is kind of the roadmap that we've established that's intending to guide our service planning decisions for the next decade or so. The ATV, as we called it, was a project that started back in 2018. And it's a joint project by Dash and the city of Alexandria to completely redesign the city's bus network based on kind of a reimagination of what the network can and should be, and also kind of a really close attention to what the community's desires are and what their priorities are in terms of how a network should be designed. So like I said, it started back in 2018. It was a 2-year project where we had multiple rounds of outreach, multiple rounds of kind of policy and philosophical discussions about what the values should be and what some of the trade-offs are and how we should prioritize certain things and how we design the routes. So we had like I said, a couple of rounds of outreach, 3 rounds of outreach, and we ended up having our final ATV plan adopted by the Dash Board of Directors in December of 2019. And that plan included 2 specific bus networks. One was for 2030, which was kind of our long-range, ambitious vision for what the future of the city's bus network could look like. And then we also had a 2022 scenario, which was kind of the first step towards that network. So we could get our kind of foot in the door and start to build towards this longer term vision. So fast forward now to the present, and we are in the first phase. We are preparing to implement that first phase, that 2022 ATV plan. So I'm going to and that's called the new Dash network. So we've changed the name for that first phase to New Dash Network, since it's not a vision anymore. It's an actual concrete change that will be affecting people within the next 6 months. So just a couple quick things to know about the ATV plan in case you haven't been involved with it previously. It seeks to increase ridership by making transit more useful to more people at more times of day. I think just to make that a little clearer, we believe that useful transit is transit that's convenient and reliable. It's something that you can kind of almost build your life around. For those that don't want to own cars, we want to have a transit network that can meet those needs. So useful transit, we typically define it as frequent and all day, which means that you have a bus arriving at your bus stop every 15 minutes or better, all day, 7 days a week. So whether you're walking out there on a Tuesday afternoon or a Sunday evening, you know that you've got a bus coming along very shortly. And that's really convenient, and that's something you can kind of build your life around. So that's useful, frequent, all-day service, and we're trying to get that to more people across the city and have it at more times a day instead of just focusing on the peaks like a lot of networks do and how Dash is currently set up. We want service that's around middays, evenings, and weekends as well. So beyond that, we also are designing this network, or it has been designed based on both existing ridership patterns and future demand. Got a lot of growth going on in the city, both jobs and population wise. We've got major developments coming in all across the city, and we've got a new metro station, which is going to be opening up next year, probably spring or summer of next year at Potomac Yard. Like I said, major increases in access to frequent all-day bus service. That's the main goal. That's for the entire city as a whole, but in particular for low-income and minority residents. And I'll show you some maps to kind of dig into that a little bit. But obviously, those groups have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic and the resulting recession. So trying to provide access to that frequent all day, that useful transit is very important. That's a hallmark of the ATV, and it gels well with the needs of the community now that during the COVID pandemic and post-pandemic. And then lastly, I'll just note that the ATV plan overall does a really good job of maintaining at least some service to existing Dash riders. That doesn't mean they have the same level of service they do today, but they do at least have some service that they can use within an eighth of a mile. So now we're to kind of the present plan, which is the new Dash network. And as I said, this is part of the first phase of the ATV. As I mentioned, the ATV has a 2022 plan. Unfortunately, this first phase is not the full 2022 plan that we had hoped to implement this year, but due to some budget constraints and just the realities of the situation, we're not going to be able to implement the full 2022 plan until FY23, hopefully, which is next year. So for now, we have a reduced version, which will be implemented in September, but it will still have a lot of the benefits that we have been expecting to achieve out of the full 2022 plan. So there's a website that I want to highlight right there, www.dashbus.com/new network. That's a great place to start, get more detailed information. If we don't answer your questions here, it's great to share with any people that you know that might benefit from Dash service or be interested. So I would recommend highly that anyone who's interested start at that website to learn more. And then the last point I'll make is just that we've been working with Metrobus on the ATV and the new Dash network for a number of years. This is a kind of a joint collaborative effort with them. Obviously, the Metrobus has a number of routes that serve the city as well, and we always work closely with them. So there are actually a few changes that would be implemented in September alongside the new Dash network, changes to Metrobus routes. And they've incorporated those into their FY22 service plans and budget plans as well. So I just wanted to highlight that those are happening in parallel, and there's information at their website, wormata.com. Next slide, please. So a couple more highlights of the new Dash network that is proposed to be implemented in September. It has one of the first things that folks that are riding Dash today will notice is it has all new route numbers. Instead of the AT prefix, we're going to be having lines 30 through 36 and lines 102 through 104. That's going to be a big change for a lot of people, and we realize that change is always difficult, and having to relearn numbers is going to be a challenge. So that's not something we took lightly. It's something that we put a lot of thought into, and I think the main reasons are that we believe that the numbers can be useful in terms of conveying information about the network. So as you can see, the core network, that buses that run 7 days a week will be lines 30 through 36, and the kind of the peak or weekday only routes will be the 100 routes. So that's helpful. And then also there were some concerns about the previous prefix, the AT, and how that can be misinterpreted as the number 80, particularly for non-native English speakers and people that aren't familiar with Alexandria. So we felt that, given the dramatic changes that we're proposing with this new network, it was an appropriate time to change the route numbers as well. Obviously, it's not just the route numbers that are changing. There's also major changes to most of the Dash routes. You can see 4 routes there are essentially keeping the same, are keeping the same routing. Just will have new names. For example, the AT8 is following the exact same alignment. It'll have the exact same service levels, but it will just now be known as line 30. So there's a couple examples like that, but all other routes, which is about 8 other routes, are being modified at least for a part of their alignment. So it's pretty big changes. Frequent network is something that I mentioned before, and I'll be highlighting it quite a bit. But it's that standard, that 15-minute all day, 7 days a week standard. We are classifying the routes that meet that standard as the frequent network, frequent all day network, and it's back to that idea of making transit more useful and putting it in places where more people can benefit from it. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the map of the new Dash network as proposed for FY22. As I've mentioned, the frequent network is kind of the centerpiece of this proposal. The red lines that you see are the frequent all day routes, which if you were to look at an existing Dash map, there would be very, very few. There'd only be really one red line. So now we're stretching across the entire city. We've got this frequent all day service that goes from the West End, goes up between Shirlington, Arlandria, Potomac Yard, and then also along the King Street corridor into Old Town. So it's spread out quite a bit. So that's the red, as I mentioned, is every 15 minutes all day, 7 days a week. The other colors are also meaningful. The blue are kind of the less frequent routes that operate mostly 7 days a week. And then the green is the peak only routes, which only operate during weekday peak hours. So next couple slides, hold on, don't advance yet, Whitney, but the next couple slides, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the benefits of this new network, particularly for certain parts of the Alexandria community. Before I get into all those benefits, I do want to acknowledge that there are some parts of the city that are going to be losing service or having less service than they do today. So I mentioned that 99.5% of existing riders will have Dash service and continue to have Dash service. The areas, and I guess I just realized I don't have a cursor that I can point to these areas, but I'll do my best. The areas, there are a couple very small areas that would represent that 0.5%. Those are Reading and Rayburn Avenue in the West End. If you see line 35 out there in the West End, there's a Reading and Rayburn just north of the Beauregard label. Whitney, I don't know if you have a cursor, you can. This might be a difficult thing to do without my cursor. So I'll just kind of, a little bit north of there, the Rayburn to the left, just to the left there. Rayburn. Can you see the label? Yeah, there you go. So that's Reading and Rayburn. So there's some riders back there that would need to walk out to Beauregard Street, but you'd have really frequent service every 10 minutes all day on line 35, and then every 15 minutes on weekends. There's a couple other areas like that, and I can go into those. Perhaps if folks have questions about them. I guess one other one I might highlight, if you go over to the line 103 and 104, in Northridge, keep going up just to the right a little bit, the green lines right there, 103 and 104. Yeah, so that area that will have peak only service, but currently there's an AT34 loop which provides midday and evening and weekend service to that area, but that would no longer be provided due to extremely low ridership, and that was a decision that came out of the Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. So those are kind of two examples of some of the parts of this plan that may have negative consequences. But I do want to move forward to the next slide now and kind of highlight a lot of the positive consequences, because I think you'll see that those greatly outnumber those. So the next couple maps show a series of demographic depictions of the city of Alexandria. You can see the labels there, so you kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. Again, the red lines represent frequent all-day service. So you can see this is population density. The darker red represents denser areas. So you can see Old Town has some densities, Arlandria has some density, West End has a whole lot of density. So you can see that these frequent all-day services are being placed in locations where a lot of people will be able to benefit from them, and we believe as a result there'll be a lot of ridership increases that come as well. Next slide, please, Whitney. And so for each of these, I've got also the overlay of the entire new Dash network, so you can see the blue and the green routes as well. But you can see that there's additional coverage there that provides service along Duke Street, which is a key transit corridor as well, and in other parts of the city as well. Next slide, please. So this one shows residents in poverty. So you can see the darker shades of purple are the areas of the city where we have higher percentage of individuals that live below the federal poverty threshold standard. So you can see in West Alexandria and Arlandria and Old Town, we've got some pockets there that are particularly well served by some of these frequent all-day routes. So really well aligned there. As you may have noticed in the last slide, Duke Street again is a corridor that we will be increasing in the future, but in FY22 it is not a frequent all-day route. So it will be a red route in the future, but Duke Street there. Whitney, can you point out Duke Street? It goes from Landmark to Old Town. Yeah, there you go. Up just above that. Yep, there you go, right there. So we're expecting that by FY24, Duke Street would be a red route. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's with all the routes. Next slide, please. This is a percentage of minority residents. You can see the darker shades of pink are the ones where you have a higher percentage of minority residents. So again, these communities are relatively well served for the most part by these frequent all-day routes. Next slide, please. Okay. And yeah, and I just want to acknowledge, I mean, this is at a very high level. There's not a granularity here that, is important for individuals to understand how they'll be impacted, but I just wanted to share that at a high level. Next slide. So overall, there's a lot of benefits. We're introducing frequent all-day bus service to major corridors across the city, huge increases in the number of residents that will have access to that useful service. You can see the table here. Under the existing Dash network, 27% of residents in Alexandria have access to that frequent all-day service. They're within a quarter mile of that service. That's about 40,000 residents. That goes up to 66% in the FY22, the new Dash network, and then up to 83% in the 2030 ATV plan. So that's 66% that we would have in September. That's about 100,000 residents. So that's over 50,000 additional residents that will have access to the frequent all-day service. And then you can see as we break it down by low income, minority, and seniors, the increases are very dramatic. You can see by FY22 we would have up to 70 to 73% of minority or low income individuals that would have access to frequent all-day service, and that goes up even more with our 2030 plan, where you have 9 out of every 10 low income individuals in the city would be on a frequent all-day route. And then job access as well is very important. Again, you can see we maintain bus service to 99.5% of existing Dash bus boardings. And the last bullet that really is important for perhaps those that maybe aren't as invested in actually riding Dash, but still need to understand the benefits. For non-users, this is huge as well, because we're expecting major increases in ridership from this plan. And obviously the benefits of transit are directly proportional to the number of people who ride the bus. So, if we want to talk about traffic mitigation, if we want to talk about environmental impact, if we want to talk about, climate impact, having more people on the bus is going to make a huge difference for our community. Next slide, please. So that's the end of my presentation. I just want to note that, we're going through the outreach right now. We've just finished our virtual community meetings. We've got our board of directors meeting next week on Wednesday, and there'll be a public hearing for this next Wednesday at the start of our board meeting. So that's an opportunity for anyone who wants to speak directly to the board about these proposals. But then there's also other opportunities. You can email, call, or just go to the website to get more information or provide input. And the board will be, they're scheduled to take under consideration the FY22 plans at their May meeting. I think it's May 10th. And that's when they would consider for adoption this plan. So, and obviously they'll be considering input from all parties, all stakeholders, both in April and May. So that's the end of my slides. I went a little bit longer than I had intended, so I'm sorry about that, but I'm happy to answer questions or take any comments that you may have.
Yes, thanks, Martin. That was very informative. I saw Chris raise his hand. So Chris, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yep. The one thing I just wanted to double check. So all these changes, if they get passed in May, they would go into effect in September, you said, of this year?
That's correct. September 5th is the date. Yes.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure, if they do go to the place, make sure I can just communicate them to my school team.
Sure.
Thanks.
And Bonnie also had her hand raised.
Thanks. I have a comment and I have a question. My comment is, thank you for getting rid of the AT in front of the bus number. It made the bus numbers really hard for some of us to read. So good move. Thank you very much. My question is, I know that the Old Town Trolley is probably going to start running in September. What is the rationale between having the Old Town Trolley, which runs, I think, every 10 or 15 minutes down Duke Street, and then, down King Street, and then also having the Old Town Circulator run down King Street?
Sure, yeah. So there is a lot of demand for transit along King Street, and we are attempting to meet that demand. When you get into urban environments like that, you really need, in order to really be a useful service, you even need higher frequencies than the 15 minutes I mentioned. So, 5 to 10 minutes is probably ideal. So when you look at the Old Town Circulator and the King Street Trolley, admittedly, they both kind of serve different, different audiences to some extent. One is more tourist oriented and one is connects to different parts of the city. But when you are able to combine those together a little bit, you can get down to those even lower frequencies, like every 5 to 10 minutes. And one thing that I should mention, the Old Town Circulator, I should have had a map ready, but it runs between Braddock Road Metro and King Street Metro. However, it's actually a combination of two routes that start in West Alexandria, line 30 and 31, and they come together. Line 30 is the AT8 basically. It comes from Van Dorn and Landmark, and then makes its way into Old Town. And then line 31 is along King Street. It starts at NBCC Alexandria, then comes down King Street all the way into Old Town. So those are coordinated to arrive at King Street offset, King Street Metro offset, and together they are when they hit the King Street Metro, then they become the Old Town Circulator, and they continue into Old Town. So the Old Town Circulator, actually, if you are using that, you can stay on your bus all the way out to West Alexandria and vice versa. So it's not just within Old Town.
Right. My comment, I guess, is that if you're on King Street between the river and the transit, the metro, you can sometimes walk faster than the bus moves because the traffic on King Street is so bad. And I was just wondering if you've given any thought to running it down, the circulator down one of the side streets, like Queen or Prince or whichever one goes the right way.
Yeah,
that's the thrust of my comment.
That's a great question. Yeah, and you're right about King Street, and we're trying to see if there's, working with the city to see if there's any options for ways that we can give buses prioritization in any way. Certainly, it's difficult in that environment, but certainly that's something we would want to pursue if we can. The idea of kind of splitting up the trolley or the Old Town Circulator was discussed. You have it kind of going westbound on Cameron and eastbound on Prince potentially. The challenge with that is that when you have the split alignment, you're kind of moving transit off the main street, which gives it less visibility. It also, from a customer standpoint, is sometimes difficult to understand where your stops are. If you're on the same street, you can usually see your stop across the street. But if you're 2 or 3 blocks away, it makes it a lot less useful, I think, than having them right together. But I think your comment about King Street and the travel speeds on there is very well taken. That's one of the slowest parts of the city. So if we were, since we're kind of consolidating a lot of the service on King Street, any improvements we can make towards prioritization or signal timings or whatever, would benefit all of our buses. So, hopefully the city will be able to take some steps in the future to work on that. But the idea is to kind of consolidate service on King Street so that you get really frequent service that's much more useful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Jim, I know you had a question.
I did.
Okay.
But I'm gonna, Ross and Sandy were first, so if you could take Ross, then Sandy, and then I would like a minute. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, and the ones that you've been doing previous to this for the general public have been excellent as well. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
The question I have is really sort of post Board of Directors meeting on the assumption that this gets approved. Talk a little bit, I guess both you and Whitney both, about the kind of public rollout, the communication strategy that you're going to use. And importantly, it seems to me, given the diversity of our community, are you going to do it in the official languages of Dash so that those who are not native English speakers can understand exactly what is being proposed? Thank you.
Sure. I can respond to that. Whitney, you can kind of fill in the gaps as needed. But yeah, we've we're doing multiple. We've done 3 rounds of outreach with the ATV, and now we're doing this current outreach we're doing, and then we're also going to have to do a lot of outreach when we're actually planning to make the changes. So we've gotten a little bit of practice. I feel like with each round we're getting a little bit better, especially when it comes to trying to reach some of those members of the community that are harder to get to reach. Non-native English speakers is one that we we do our best to get to. We currently translate to Spanish and Amharic, and perhaps we look at expanding that to other languages as well, especially when we get closer to actually making the changes. Due to staffing resource limitations, where it's harder to do a lot of translations, just because we're limited in that regard. But we always do Spanish and Amharic, and actually our new Dash website that we mentioned has the materials translated into Spanish and Amharic, and coincidentally that's the same website that we're going to use going into the September implementation. So we're starting people to get used to that website now, and they'll continue to be a resource going into September and going forward. And I think a lot of the communication is trying to help people understand what the specific impact is going to be for them. And that's the hardest part, is that you've got these complicated maps that are hard to read, and does this line go to my street or not? So what we try to do is to provide neighborhood specific information where we can, and you can find that on our website, and some of those are translated as well. And then ultimately, I think when we roll out the final plan, we're planning to do a trip planner where you can enter your trip details, time of day, where you're starting, where you're ending, and you'll see two itineraries. One will be what your itinerary is for the current network, and then one will be your itinerary for the future network. So you kind of compare side by side and see exactly what your situation will be. And hopefully that'll be that kind of tool is something that kind of, I'm not sure if we would be able to, how we would translate, but just having that basic tool might kind of be a universal thing, even if you're not a native English speaker.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I can add on a little bit to that. So obviously outreach is going to be a really important piece to the implementation of the new Dash network. So there are a number of platforms that we're going to be using that are included, but not limited to, our website, social media, direct marketing. We're going to be working with different community groups, other jurisdictions. So there's going to be a lot of outreach that's to come. And Jim actually mentioned that as well. So, and I'm happy to share, the efforts that we are proposing with this group.
I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
Sure.
I believe
And
Sandy is
Sandy,
next.
yeah, Sandy.
Mine's sort of a minor issue, but and I realize King Street becomes a corridor for various modes of transportation with Dash. But if you consider the scheduling of, say, the 2 and the 8, where it comes from, say, Braddock, a common point, merges into King Street, those two buses often come within a few minutes of each other. So you miss one, you miss them both, is what happens. And then, of course, heading west, they diverge to their various routes. Maybe this has been taken into consideration, but having those two buses take off within a few minutes of each other, or so they reach at least King Street within a few minutes of each other. I realize the two loops around. It would seem logical to space that so maybe they're 15 minutes apart, and that way people can catch those buses. I mean, more likely they can catch them. And then when they diverge to go their separate routes, they don't really change the frequency. They change the times in which they go on those divergent routes heading west. King Street, and then is going to be serviced even more with the trolley coming back in, and then, of course, an all-day, everyday type program, which will take people out. But and maybe, like I said, maybe this has already been given consideration in this new proposal. But I just wanted to voice it because I had input from my friends who ride the Dash, and that's one of their sort of big complaints. You miss one, you miss both buses, because sometimes the 8 scheduled first and the 2 scheduled second, but because of traffic, sometimes the 2 will arrive one bus length in front of the 8. It's an oddity, I understand. Scheduling can't maybe correct that. But that's all I have. Right.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And that's one of the challenges that we're trying to improve with this new network design. It's kind of designed to allow us to make those scheduling and coordination efforts. So like the Old Town Circulator, you can see the OTC in Old Town is going to be, like I said, a combination of 2 routes that will be offset, and they'll be leaving Braddock Road. Like the routes will both operate every 15 minutes or so. Well, let me take that back. They'll operate, for example, say they operate every 30 minutes. They each operate every 30 minutes. They're going to be scheduled so that combined, there's a bus coming every 15 minutes. So there's, and the way that the Old Town Circulator alignment is set up, it'll be much easier to schedule that and maintain that. But yeah, thank you for that question. That's a great point.
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank you for the session. And Martin, thanks for your presentation. And again, publicly, I want to thank you for the ones I've seen you give to the community. Really an excellent job. For the group's info, Martin and Whitney are aware of this. I've been advocating for a few months now for free fare for low-income residents, knowing that the Stash network was on the books, because I do believe that frequent all-day service is sort of the foundation of providing the right bus service for the city. And this new network will do that. But I think there's a social equity lens that I look at this, particularly through the pandemic and through my work where I'm calling people and I know who's been affected firsthand by this pandemic. And so I do think there's a social justice reason. And I've, again, for the fellow members info, I've shared that view with the city council, and I plan to speak to that issue next week before the board. And another reason I'm bringing it up is Josh had mentioned that there is this initiative. I heard the mayor speak about it 2 weeks ago of possibly considering free fare for all. And I'm actually less inclined to support that because I think the missing link in this network, if there's extra money after we implement the network that Martin briefed, and free fare for low-income residents, to me, the next nickel would be to take care of that Duke Street corridor with the high-frequency service, because there's more low-income and people of color on that are not being served with high-frequency service. And so that's a trade-off. I think we all ought to at least think about that. Maybe we can discuss that in the future, but I wanted to mention it tonight because it is something that's going to be decided before we meet again. And I will be engaging that on a personal level between now and then. And happy to entertain any questions or send you information of the research I've done on those topics. I don't know, Martin, if you have any comment. I guess question for Martin is, do you expect Dash to say in some way to city council or the board, if you have more money, would you please fund the Duke Street corridor? Do you have a way of doing that?
I think that's going to be a topic of discussion at the board meeting next week. I think that's what they want to weigh in on, because that is a consideration. Obviously free fares sound great at the surface, but like you said, is that how the board and how the city as a whole wants to spend the resources, or would they rather focus on service? So that's a question I think the board is going to be taking up.
In order of magnitude, the recurring costs to do that per a budget memo, and Whitney, maybe you can send that to all the members, that budget memo number 26 that says that the recurring cost of free fare for all is about $5 million a year. And Martin, I don't know if you have a figure for doing the frequency service on Duke Street corridor, but we're talking what, $1 million?
It's a little bit over $1 million.
A little over $1 million. So I mean, it's
maybe 1.5. It's probably close.
Yeah,
to
so 1.5, but it's a fraction of the 5 million. So before you spend 5 million, it's just a trade-off issue, and I want the other members to be aware of it. It's going to go on.
Yeah, and just the one last point I would just raise is that, you know, I think the discussion of low income fares has been coming up quite a bit lately, understandably so. And Dash and the city have been conducting a consultant-led study to examine the feasibility of such a program. And that's partially feeding into some of the budget discussion that's happening right now. But we're expecting the final results of that study to come back within the next couple of weeks here. So if that's something that's of interest to the committee, we can certainly report back on the findings of that study.
And Jim, you also had a question about the Duke Street corridor. Did you want to pose that now, or do you want to maybe follow up via email?
You want to just read the question I submitted in advance again so the board
Sure.
knows about it?
Sure. So one of the slides showed the high density area of low income residents along the Duke Street corridor that will not be provided frequent all day service. Perhaps the single biggest shortfall in the FY22 U- network. What options might be addressed? What options might address this shortfall?
Yeah, and so that's kind of what we were just talking about, is the Duke Street improvements to get Duke Street up to a red frequent all day route would be about $1.5 million all in. And that's something that we've included for FY24, but not for FY2022. So, you know, that's a possible trade-off that could be discussed. And one just minor point not minor point, but point I'll make about Duke Street is that though it doesn't have one route that runs frequently every 15 minutes, it does have line 30, which runs every 10 minutes peak between Landmark and King Street, and every 30 off peak. And then it also has two WMATA routes, which run every 20 and every 30 minutes respectively. So though the services aren't coordinated, like the point Sandy made about how buses sometimes can't be coordinated perfectly, this is another instance where they can't quite be coordinated perfectly to have, you know, frequent all day headways. But there is a large quantity of service on Duke Street, especially between Fox Chase and King Street Metro. So just a minor point.
Thanks, Martin. And again, I think it was Ross, you asked about the outreach. That was a question I'd sent in advance. And so I do look forward to our next meeting, hearing about the additional outreach that'll be planned. I think that's an important subject.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Are there other questions for Martin amongst members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you, Martin, on behalf of the committee for an excellent presentation and for the answers to your questions that were posed. Is there other business that members of the committee wish to bring up before we close here?
I have one question about, and this may be in the guidelines that Whitney's going to send us. Are we going to operate by the same rules that a city board or commission would operate by, where we are not to email more than one other person on the committee at a time? In other words, we can't have three of us in a conversation. Is that applicable to this group?
That is actually a good question. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. I don't believe so, since we're not an official board, but let me double check.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to communicate with the other members. But it'd be important to know the rules before we do that. Thank you.
I want to follow up on Jim's point, because there are a couple of things that I think would be useful for the committee to have. One obviously is a full roster of members, but I also know I'm sensitive to people's privacy. So I'd like to ask the group, as your interim chair here, whether you are willing to share your contact information as well as your names for the rest of the committee. Anybody have any difficulty with that? Or are we in agreement?
Let's do. I don't know if everyone can see everyone on the screen. So if someone is opposed to sharing their email address, would you please let it be known by unmuting yourself and speaking?
Okay, thank you. The second thing that I think might be helpful for those who are the uninitiated, could you, Whitney, send out a also a document that shows who's on the board of directors of DASH, and perhaps a list of the senior employees of DASH as well? I think that's all part of the sort of information packet that would be helpful, I think, to members of this committee. Is there any other information that members would like to see in their sort of additional welcome package at this point?
Yes, and I don't need it right away, but certainly before the July meeting, whatever you have off the shelf in terms of the demographics of the ridership. So when we talk about outreach, we can talk about what communities we're reaching. I think it would be helpful to have some information about the demographics of the ridership. If that's okay with the chair and asking for that.
I think that's fine. Any, Sandy?
We had two very good presentations, what Whitney gave and what Martin gave. Are these, can we access these on one of the websites, or how could we see copies of these two presentations? One sort of gave us the rules as the committee, but the other one gave us, Martin gave us the new DASH network proposals and whatever. Is that available?
Yes, so what I can do is I can include a link to this PowerPoint with the minutes as well, but I will send a separate PDF document with the full guidelines. And then actually more information about the new DASH network is on that website, that web page that Martin gave you the link to as well. So I'll make sure and include that for you too.
Just one further piece of business as well. Since there is not a full complement of members presently on this committee, are you going to continue your efforts, Whitney, for outreach to get more members? Are you soliciting this group for suggestions of members? How do you want to proceed with that?
So we actually are within the range. So the range was 9 to 14. And I believe right now we have 11. Actually 10, but I am expecting one more person from the Commission for Women. Has a member that is interested in participating as well, but I haven't heard back from them just yet. So at that point, you know, we're firmly in the range. So I don't anticipate adding to the group at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The other point I would like to make, and then I would like to hear from anyone else on this group, is serving as your interim chair. I would also be interested in getting from you between now and let's say the end of, well, I guess the third week of June at the latest, suggestions for agenda items for the next meeting beyond those which the DASH staff may suggest. So again, assuming that you will be getting my email and contact information, you can simply drop me a note and copy Whitney, and we can evaluate that as well. I, for one, having chaired many groups before, would suggest that we try to get our meetings to 90 minutes or less for efficiency's sake. Obviously, there may be important issues that come up that may take a little bit longer. And tonight's meeting, because of all the introductions, et cetera, took a little bit longer, but I would suggest we can get through our business in a reasonable time to maybe 5:30 to 7 framework, if possible. So before we close, any other comments or concerns, questions from the group?
I just had one quick one. I just want to make sure, we've talked a lot about minority, poor communities, and I just want to make sure that there are people on the group that represent those communities. So I'll just leave that as a comment.
Very good one. Thank you.
And in terms of future topics, in addition to outreach, which I think is should be a particular focus in July, the other thing that's going to impact Dash service in the not too distant future is the potential of having a Duke Street Transitway or bus rapid transit corridor. That is not a Dash purview issue, and so this is partly a question for Martin and Whitney, but I think it's an important aspect that will affect the ability of Dash to provide rapid service by having dedicated lanes. And so might it be possible to get an update on that, ideally at the June meeting, or at least for the chair to consider that as, so Ross, if you would consider that with all the other nominations you get by June. And in terms of timing, my understanding is the city had planned to start official outreach for that this spring or early summer. So it, the timing might work out.
That was my understanding of the schedule as well, Jim.
Yeah, and Ross, did you, yeah, who else lives in Central Alexandria? Ross, you do, right?
I do.
Yeah. And I do as well.
Okay. Sandy, you do?
Thank you.
Okay. Whitney, anything else that we need to cover before we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
No, that covered everything from me. So bring on the motion.
All right. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, well, thank you all very much. We look forward to our second meeting in July. And in the interim, I hope we can have a legally allowable dialogue amongst members of this group.
Great to meet everyone.
And thanks to Whitney and Martin and the rest of the staff of Dash for organizing this committee and for a very informative meeting.
Yeah, great. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Dash has left the meeting at 4. Alert, Eric Van Board has left new options button drop. Zoom alert, hell yeah. Alert, Alt F4. Alert, Whitney code, leave, Alt plus Q button to activate, press space.